Hello there. So, in the last session, I discussed how engaging with our uncomfortable questions can be part of a life service, like servicing a car. And I encouraged us to reflect on the fact that our questions expose the underlying perceptions and assumptions within our thinking about Christian faith, and suggested that this process is also an essential part of our development. That a key discipline of faith is to question our questions and to become aware of our assumptions, perceptions and emotions that sit behind those questions. It's my belief that this is what the Apostle Paul meant when he invited us to be transformed by the renewing of our minds. So these next few sessions are designed to help us reflect on some of the ways our thinking may be wired, and to reflect on our ways of thinking and perceiving that sit behind our questions. And in doing so, perhaps we may become aware of the ways these deep undercurrents impede our thinking, or perhaps give energy to questions that need to quieten down. Perhaps this is a similar approach to good therapy. As you know, therapists don't change the circumstances of the past that affect our present, but they can help us change the way we think, perceive and feel about them in order to free us up in the present. Just so in the wirings of our perceptions of life and faith. Our issue may not be our faith, but how we are able to think and feel about it. So today we're going to have a think about how much our Christmas trees obscure our view of the crib. And to do that, we're going to have to think about a word that is called syncretism. Now, a dictionary definition of syncretism is this: it's the amalgamation or attempted amalgamation of different religions, cultures, or schools of thought. And a simple example of syncretism is the Christmas tree. I mean, decorating evergreens in midwinter seems to have been had long non-Christian origins, but that doesn't stop us absorbing these practices. Now, similarly, the ancient Hebrews, for example, they referred to God as El, which means Lord, and the God we worship started being called El Shaddai, which means the Lord Most High. But what we're less aware of is that the name El is actually the Canaanite name of the king of the gods. And it's worth pointing out, perhaps now, that most Jews would probably describe Christianity as syncretic, because we borrow so deeply from ideas about the Messiah and the Jewish Torah. And as a point of interest, the average church is very like a Jewish synagogue. So we see that syncretism allows for an absorption of pre-existing practices, beliefs and concepts, and repackages them in Christian clothes. Now, we don't need to throw a baby out with the bathwater here. We need to recognise that at its best, it's a very helpful process. So, for example, in the case of the name of El, it's quite helpful because it allows us to adopt ideas in the culture around us that fit with the reality revealed to us about God. We're allowed to borrow, basically, in order to make the point. Now, the reason I'm saying this is that Christian faith has never been in a kind of standalone, intellectually pure belief system. How we understand it, perceive it, talk about it, live it, is always contingent on and interrelated with the culture we're in, and the ways our language and culture both constrain and support the ways we're able to understand, believe, and express that faith. The reason I'm raising this is that it's helpful to realise that we all have a faith and questions about our faith that are to some extent defined by and constrained by the way we think and perceive. And those ways of thinking are limited by the ways our culture lets us think. Why does this make a difference? Well, we see this principle at work in the story of Jesus' teaching and healing in his hometown of Nazareth in Matthew 13, and this is the text. Coming to his hometown, Jesus taught the people in their synagogue, and they were astonished. Where did this man get such wisdom and miraculous powers, they asked. Isn't this the carpenter's son? Isn't his mother's name Mary? And aren't his brothers James, Joseph, Simon and Judas? Aren't all his sisters here with us as well? Where then did this man get all these things?" And they took offence at him. But Jesus said to them, "Only in his hometown and in his own household is a prophet without honour. And he did not do many miracles there because of their unbelief." Isn't that incredible? The work of the actual Son of God was constrained in his hometown because he was perceived by them as the carpenter's son rather than as the Son of God. The unbelief he met was rooted in ways of thinking about him that were entirely understandable, indeed quite normal and natural, and very much to do with the culture and the perceptions they had of him. And of course they weren't entirely wrong. He was the carpenter's son. So in this strange passage we see perceptions limiting belief, which then limit the work of God, even when Jesus is standing right in front of people. So how much more of a problem might we have when we have 2,000 years of culture and perceptions standing between us and him? And how much more do we have to work to be aware of their impact? Anyway, let's cycle back to our first question about Christmas trees. To what extent do our Christmas trees obscure our view of the crib, the cross, and the resurrection? To be free to see Christ clearly, we need to find ways to look beyond our Christmas trees and to see that reality. So in the next few sessions, I'm going to outline a few common thought models, worldviews, perceptions that may be rattling around within us and may need a bit of cold, hard therapeutic review to help us move on. Now, they won't be an exhaustive list. You will have your own baggage arranged in its very own special way. These are just the ones that I happen to spend a lot of time thinking about. You may find, of course, that after this your questions retain their power, that they were right questions in the first place, and pursuing them remains essential. Or you may find they evaporate. Either way, you'll be active in the process of being transformed in the renewing of your mind. And the point is, you won't simply be a victim of messy thinking. So to whet your appetite, here are the next few subjects, not necessarily in order. Number 1, a definition of idolatry and its effect on our perceptions. Number 2, modernism and classical philosophy. Number 3, postmodernity and how we think. Number 4, ways we perceive the Bible. And number 5, the way we use language as metaphor rather than it being truth. Now that's either whetted your appetite or made you somewhat perplexed. Do get in contact if you'd like some greater explanation. Thank you. Bye-bye.